ANZ's chief executive has warned that the turmoil which has plagued the American banking sector is not over yet. For a check of this morning's business news, let's bring in Peter Switzer, founder of the Switzer Report. Pete, good morning to you. So how will this impact the markets this week?
Watch, Pete. It's the black cloud hanging over the stock market. I was interested in the way Jerome Powell, the US central bank boss, described what we're seeing right now. And remember, Deutsche Bank was down 13% on Friday at one stage, ended up being down only 8%. But surprisingly, the US markets, all of the key indexes, ended up in positive territory. So the irrepressible positivity and optimism of the Americans continues. But Jerome Powell's view was, after events like the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and the other one's Signature and whatever, he described it as you expect a bumpy road. Now, he's not looking as though he's panicking about this. And also, I think he probably quite wisely raised interest rates by 25 basis points last week rather than the once expected 0.5%. And I think he's basically showing that if he was panicking, he wouldn't have raised it at all. And I think all the central banks kind of got together and agreed that if they put off raising interest rates, it might have sent up the wrong idea that they were really worried. The big problem, I think, for the whole banking story was Janet Yellen when she was talking to the US Senate, and she basically implied that bank deposits, not all bank deposits were going to be protected by the banking system. And that really, I think, has put a mixed message out there and spooked a number of people. And that's why they've gone cruising around looking for banks that may well be vulnerable to further interest rate rises. And I think if further interest rate rises really are getting pretty well on the back burner now.
Okay, so all eyes are set to be on the retail and monthly inflation data this week, Pete.
Yeah, that's the local story, Pete, without a doubt. We need to see retail coming off the boil, or else we conclude that the last 10 interest rate rises haven't done much to slow down the kind of drivers that hit inflation. So you want to see that at least being flat or possibly negative. And then when it comes to this monthly inflation number, not as important as a quarterly, but they'll be watching the trend, and the last number was 7.4. I think anything with a 6 on it, the market will like it, and it will add to the situation or add to the belief that the RBA will pause next Tuesday. It needs data to support the reason why we want to pause, namely the banking turmoil at the moment. But putting it all together, if the data makes it easier, I think the RBA will actually pause next week.
Okay, so does the RBA need a dual board structure now, Pete?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, Pete. Look, I think Dr. Phil Lowe's a really smart guy, but I've never seen a bigger mistake made by an RBA boss than that 2024 call that interest rates wouldn't rise. So that was a big mistake. But in the past, RBA's governors before him have made mistakes. We had Glenn Stevens raising interest rates in 2011, 2012. And I remember when I was doing the Sky Business TV program, I used to rip into him all the time, and people would contact me, chief economist, saying, you're wrong. And even Chris Joy and I had a big argument over that. And Chris Joy actually admitted I was right eventually, some years down the track. RBA governors make mistakes, and the big problem, Pete, is I don't think the board is gutsy enough and tough enough on the Reserve Bank governors. And that's why Phil Lowe should have been castigated by his board at least 6 months after that 2024 call and said, withdraw that, take that away. And they didn't do it. So there's something wrong with the board. The composition has to be a lot better. If you run through the people on the board, they're all smart people. I know them all. But there's not one person there who represents small business. And I think that's a big problem there on that board. You've got to improve the people on the board. And you've got to have someone gutsy like, a Jerry Harvey type person who would take the governor on, who would yell and scream and carry on like a maniac for the sake of getting the right decision. At the moment, I think they all just simply agree with the Reserve Bank governor, and he gets away with blue murder.